Okay, our next presenter is my friend Dan Burton. I ran into Dan as a result of our early advocacy here in this town, where the city got tired of listening to me beg for safe access on F Street, which used to look like, well, it looked like a lot of the other streets in town. 2 lanes of asphalt and gravel with cars parked all over it, and kids walking in the ditch, no bicycles. Anyway, they sent me to a conference in Seattle with my friend Dave McCullough, and we came back incredibly inspired and more forceful than ever about getting some fixes in town. And ultimately, we were led through one barricade after another. We developed a non-motorized plan and a non-motorized advisory board, getting it into the comprehensive plan. Well, years. I couldn't believe how long it took. Anyway, eventually we got the city to rebuild F Street, and we got the trail system. A few years later, the city was undertaking the project to redevelop Upper Sims Way. The plan initially was traffic signals and a 5-lane section, 2 lanes in each direction, and a 2-way left turn lane in the middle. I kind of raised my hands and went, wait, there's other things, there's other ways to do this, and which was the roundabout. And I learned about roundabouts at a conference that Dan was at, where I was at, Dan was speaking. Eventually, the process led to Dave Peterson, the city engineer at the time, whispering in my ear, let's bring Dan Burton to town to process this. And he's a wonder with his ability to create a vision of what could be. Because what I've learned in my business as an electrical contractor is we're always trying to describe what something's going to be in someone's house, and they can't see it. Once it's shown to people in a drawing, they go, oh, yeah, that's what I want. So this is what Dan is really great at. So anyway, here's my friend Dan Burton, who was, as a result of that weekend, decided to move here to Port Townsend because it's such a great town, as we all know. So we are really lucky to have him here. He's actually done this stuff that he's going to do tonight, or this afternoon, this morning, all over the world for lots of other communities. I think I heard you say once 1,500 communities you worked with. 3,800. So please welcome my friend Dan Burton.
Thank you so much, Scott. And it's a true story. After coming to a conference that was set up for active transportation, I came, and Scott took me on tours of the trails, and I realized how strong the volunteerism was. And so the next summer, I had my wife come out, and we bought a house, and we've just thoroughly enjoyed living at the end of a peninsula on the end of a peninsula, right? I mean, it's easy to say after you work in 3,800 communities, it's time now to live in one. And live in one that works. And it's a process of incremental change. We don't do everything overnight, but it's time to now give it a huge boost to amp it up a bit, and that's the purpose of the session today. So I'll move straight into my presentation. I always like to say at the opening of a presentation what I, as a speaker, am trying to come across with, the things that I think are going to be important to Port Townsend, and but I think the most important thing for me to get across today is to develop a sense of urgency. We're likely to lose a lot of the qualities why we live here if we don't act, and that means everybody has to speak the same vocabulary to understand where the stepping stones are, and to make sure if there's a missing stepping stone or two, as Mike so elegantly put together, that we have them in place. And I'll start by saying I could not be more pleased with the elected leaders in this town, for the great and most part, and likewise with the quality of the staff. People who come here to work, who sometimes have to live out of town in order to work here, are among the very best. I get to work with them, and I am just totally delighted. I want to also put a health component. The organization I've worked in for maybe 13 years now, Blue Zones, has determined that if we want to live healthy, happy, long years, then 80% of that choice is up to us. But that means we have to have the right built environment. We have to have the right habitat, the right nest in order to raise our families and for us to do well, especially in the older ages. So there are a number of components that are essential, and I'm so glad that we've got our land use folks here, that if we don't do the right things with land use, then all we're going to do is build more traffic. People have to drive long distances in order to work here, and when I go out and watch the traffic flowing into town, I realize a lot of those people would prefer to live affordably in a town as good as the one they get to work in, right? So land use is probably the strongest arrow in the quiver, and I'm so delighted that folks are here. We're all talking about the system that we build is balanced. It's not favoring one mode over another. Everything works. Freight moves. Cars, which sadly have become a necessity, need to move, but they do not need to move fast. This is the end of the road. This is not trying to get to somebody else's town, right? And so I think the important thing is that we create that balance, and that calls for what we call multimodal transportation. Transit, walking, biking, driving, freight, everything needs to work. Also needs to work for emergency responders. So everything we design, our engineers are challenged not to leave anyone out. But sadly, when most of our engineers went to school, they were taught only one thing matters. And now they're being taught differently, and that's really great news. So what are the things we're trying to build in at this late stage that we left out originally? What we refer to as multimodal communities. That means that people have mobility, but they also have a choice to switch out one mode over another. To walk to a transit station and use a bus. I do that every time I take a ferry across. I take the fast ferry, and I'm so delighted we've got an express bus to Kitsap, and or Kingston. Get me geography right. and I'll be doing that tomorrow morning. Although I learned that the fast ferry doesn't work on Saturdays, so we'll get there one day. Now, the other thing I really want to emphasize in this presentation is that the engineers were, when they were taught wrong, they were taught to do everything to increase the speed of cars, to keep that high levels of efficiency. These were the big taxpayers, they thought. And even though those drivers would have liked to have had a choice in their transportation, many times, they weren't given that because we focused on what we call forgiving design. And forgiving design is why we have these wide, swooping curb radii. It's why we have right turn lanes or left turn lanes where we don't need them. They only benefit that efficiency of the road. And if we can find a good way to design where we can now focus on slow speeds and forgiving design, then great. That's the new focus. The other thing, and again, I'm just trying to broaden the vocabulary, I think most people have heard the term 85th percentile, which essentially means we're trying to keep capacity to our roads, and so we're setting our speeds for what 85% of the people are doing. We're not going to honor the 15% that are going above the speed, but by doing that, we're actually inducing more speed. So many folks are now saying, get rid of that daggone thing, and let's now design the road for the speeds, for the land use conditions, for the type of people using the street, and that's just going to be a huge step forward, but that's still the rule of the land as of today. So I would say one of the first things is to back up our elected leaders that we really don't need the 85th percentile. Our engineers need someone to say, you don't have to follow that, right? So anyway, this is the really good news. We not only have vast new sums of money coming into transportation, but we're having a new approach. It's referred to as a safe systems approach. It's also called Target Zero. I'm actually putting together a study tour to Norway, Denmark, and Sweden this September to take a whole state to study the foundation of Target Zero, which means basically that we're trying to get down to no deaths whatsoever. And that's for anybody, right? So how does it work? Well, it works by focusing on making safety proactive. Mostly engineers are taught to react. If people got hurt, go ahead and correct it. Well, why not be proactive and not have it occur whatsoever? It also means shared responsibility. And that means that the designer of the road has as much responsibility for the crash as the person who got taken out. And so the driver's responsible, the pedestrian, bicyclist is responsible, but the designer has that first chance to prevent the crash opportunity. And then to prevent exposure to large force, that would be the bigger vehicles, and that means we'll really watch out for anyone who's outside of that 2-ton machine, right? And that's the focus we haven't had enough. And then, of course, back to safe roads behavior, and I'll talk a little bit about that. All this is coming from the Washington DOT, one of the leaders in this whole movement in the entire nation, very well staffed. And what they're basically saying is, if a crash were to occur, as you see here with the Swiss cheese, if everything lines up, then that crash will occur. But if you just get one of those elements no longer to allow the crash to occur, then it no longer happens. I have been, throughout my career, one of the strongest proponents for roundabouts in America. That's one reason why we have them here. I totally believe in roundabouts. One of the things that graphically they show is if you use a conventional signalized intersection, as you see here, with the chart on the right, that opens to all kinds of conflicts and crashes, right? But if you use a roundabout, look how it just shrinks dramatically. It's hard. It's almost impossible. You can still do it if you really try to have a crash, but boy, it's not going to be the big disaster if you go in to the intersection and get broadsided with a T crash or something like that. Now, I want to talk a little bit too about equity, and for Port Townsend, that means that certainly we're going to look out for everyone, but to focus on getting the most affordable transportation to work best. And that would be walking or biking, and still support the transportation system we force so many people into. Being 79 years old, I'm going to focus on aging in place. That the older population is the most vulnerable. They don't survive well, and they don't always move with the right balance and so on. Last year I had serious problems with balance following a surgery, I'm pretty good today. I can still walk as fast as I used to, but I may not be able to when I'm 80 or 85. In fact, I know I won't be able to. I'm so delighted that Port Townsend is looking at focusing on what it values. Those things that we care about the most. But sadly, and although this is a national perspective, it's also true in Port Townsend. We value one thing and we build just the opposite. And Mike, you did a beautiful job of showing how and why that occurs. So I want to celebrate Port Townsend and start with the beauty of Water Street. It's truly one of the most remarkable main streets in the entire nation. It's larger, more historic, and it's operating beautifully, right? And it's a really great place for us to continue to invest. But I also want to celebrate F Street. When I gave the presentation, I don't know how many years ago, 20 years ago, I guess, Scott was a member of the audience, and he came back, and he and Dave were able to figure out how to build a near perfect street. A great street that's still an important collector of traffic shouldn't operate at more than 25. And when you bike, you should feel comfortable. When you walk, you should be comfortable on either side of the street. It should be easy to get across the street. It should be green. And truly, we've had people from Oregon and all parts of Washington come to study F Street in the early years after it was implemented. It's that good. But we also are doing well with things green. Our rain gardens are an envy of many, and truly wonderful places to sit and just enjoy the beauty of our downtown. These are the people that brought me in. You can see Scott and a number of people here, but I can't remember how many people we had. It was over 200, wasn't it, Scott? Say it was. It was packed, yeah. But that was when I was convinced to bring my wife here and for us to enjoy the fruits of the labor of the many leaders in the town. But it's not perfect. This is an intersection that will be rebuilt. But look at all the things that just aren't quite right. Really crazily skewed crossings for pedestrians. The street has many remarkable things that have been added since the time I was first here. But look at that skewed right turn off of Kearney, right? It's like, why does that exist? And every time I either bike or drive through that intersection, I'm saying, okay, it's time for a rebuild. And I'm glad the state has made this a priority and that the city is contributing to this rebuild. I love Water Street. And again, there are very few towns in America, probably no more than 10 that I know of, that have achieved the goals they seek. It's very bikeable, very walkable, and very drivable downtown. But there's some pretty cool, innovative things that have been done. Because there are no alleys, the only way to make a delivery is on Main Street by using the permitted crossing into the bike lane. This becomes a great shared use space. The speeds, as often as I measure them, are at or below 15 miles an hour. And that maxes out the retail and social life of any street. So brilliant work by our engineers to achieve this. Oh, by the way, anytime there's a freight delivery, that's a portable traffic calming device doing its work, right? I love it. If you look very closely at this image, there are still things we can do here. There's no reason for on-street parking. And we could do a beautiful buffer bike lane, right? But at least right now we have a wonderful bike lane. But now, and again, kudos to the city for doing this. Notice their they're tightening down the travel lanes. It's incremental. My goal would be for the city to get down to nothing but a 10-foot lane anywhere in our city. Maybe on a curve, okay, we'll give that, 10 feet. Well, 9 would be my favorite, but that's a condition analysis that we can work toward. I love the investments that are going into honoring our buildings in place, and truly, many places where we're achieving even 5 miles per hour. Why would you need more? This is the street where I live. My home's on the left, and I love Willow. Truly, the paved portion is only 12 feet, and it's a two-way street. And I have my office sitting where I can watch down on the street every day. I see about 2/3 of all the movement is people walking, and bicyclists as well. Occasionally, there will be a driver. The service industry is very good about their speeds. There are a couple of my neighbors who I'd love to just put a note on their windshield saying, "Do you really need to do 25 down our street?" Right? So the average speed's about 15. On some days, it gets as high as 20. My goal number 1, there should be no local streets in Port Townsend where anyone is given permission to drive above 20. Right? In Canada, where's Todd? Todd? We have a brilliant planner and economist visiting us from Victoria. Have Victoria local streets gotten down to 30 kilometers, which would be 18.
Right, so it used to be the default was, 40 kilometers an hour on all streets, including neighborhood streets. And the city just passed a law saying everything is now at 30 kilometers, which is about 20 miles an hour on all the local streets. So it inverted. It used to require a special sign to reduce the speed from 40 kilometers an hour. No, it was 50 kilometers an hour. It was just default everywhere. They changed the law, so now you need a sign to indicate higher than 30 kilometers an hour. So they inverted the responsibility for designating special speed limits.
Fantastic. I also know that shortly after attending the conference, Scott Walker and Dave worked together to put in a mini circle. It's called a neighborhood mini circle, and this is over 20 years old. And Scott built this for under $100. That's pretty amazing. It's very attractive. Not as attractive as one the city's recently built. So. I love it, it works, and it's a nice corner for people to socially gather. This is a marvelous achievement, getting treatments in here. This is the before, and this is the after. Kudos to the state. We can still do better, but this is a great and a remarkable start. The edge lane roads that we're now seeing, I don't know how many we're up to, but I have studied 2 of them. Are we up to how many? 4 now. And I would love to see even more. It's cheaper than building sidewalks by far. And it gives a very safer speed. A friend of mine who lives on this street tells me she can now get in and out of her driveway without having somebody out there guiding her out. It's just remarkable. But these things are against the rules at a national level. And again, kudos to the city council and to our engineering team to say, heck with that. We're going to build safer roads and roads that work for everyone. So that's a brilliant example. Thank you, everyone who took that. Now, in the We Can Do Better department, this, of course, is the lower cities, right? Is that the correct term? Lower cities, 20, St. Louis 20. This was back when I first visited in 2005. I said, well, we can do better than this. So I went out and photographed it a week ago. Yeah, we've done better. We've now got nicely marked bike lanes and overall better treatments. But I don't know why we still have left out an important crossing. And here's what happens if you leave out a crossing. See if I can get this all to come in. Every crossing a pedestrian takes, they're exposed to 6 conflicts. So 6 plus 6 plus 6, 18, just to get across the street is stupid, right? And so I would love to see that done just as quickly as we could. And likewise, this right turn lane, we have to figure out how many cars use it and what kind of a ripple effect it would be if we took out the right turn lane. I'd like to see it disappear. Right? And likewise, on any street that doesn't need a right turn or a left turn lane, we'd be safer to get rid of them. Now, there are places where we do need them, right? Another example, Sheraton, is that right? Yeah. And Discovery, this right turn lane, we're already talking with the city about removing this lane. And now we could be able to compact the intersection, one that works so much better for all the children who go to and from school. And I hope that becomes a priority fix. Now, I mentioned I love neighborhood mini circles, but I want them to be attractive. And I know this is meant to be temporary, but I'm going to show you some much better designs we come up with. So, as we move forward, certainly we need the vision. That's what I do. I leave the community after the vision is solidified, and then we let the professionals do the work. But we then need a plan, and then with the plan, we need the team. And the good news is Port Townsend has all 3, and so it's time to really act. I'm going to now talk through, that slide's out of place, let me just skip it. I want to establish the core principles of building for walkable communities. First of all, everything we do should be built on why cities exist. And they exist for trade. It's not just the exchange of our goods, culture, friendship, and knowledge. They're also meant to minimize traffic. And we've done just the opposite. We've reduced trade and we've maximized the need to travel. So we could continue, any city could continue to build for cars, and with a very well-proven result, you'll get more cars. Or we could build for people with a well-proven result where that's been done, that you can now have more people and less traffic. So I am a solid believer of Kevin Lynch's work. It's really worth getting a copy of and going through. But all things, we need paths. The path could be a trail, it could be a sidewalk, it could be a street, it could be a water course. But we need those, but we also need edges. And if you don't have an edge to a sidewalk, you're not inviting people to really, truly walk there, correct? And then we need districts. And there are many wonderful districts in Port Townsend, and each one needs to be treated with not only love, but a unique quality to it. And then, of course, the intersections are absolutely key. Here you see it blown up a little bit. That we need the districts to be unique, but then we need, make sure I read it right, the nodes. Those are our intersections primarily. And each intersection should be a place we want to go to, right? And not feel that we're not being treated. And then, of course, to have the landmarks. And Port Townsend, fortunately, is just packed with landmarks. So, right now, only about 1% of people use bikes for commuting throughout Washington. And it's somewhat true in Port Townsend. Now, that's not a correct figure when we look at all trips. And Todd, you are beautiful in having come up with that. How many people now use bikes for any transportation in Victoria?
In Victoria, the last survey showed 9%.
9%, okay. So that is way up. But if we want the other 60% of all Americans who say they would bike or walk if there was less stress, then we're going to have to build differently. So you can see the differences we would take. This is for cyclists. Likewise, if we're to have more people walking and biking more times, then we need to focus on the tools to the left and not to the right. And thank you, Washington DOT, for creating this beautiful bracket. So how do we get there? How do we create that level of comfort where we're able to get 60% of people to say they would prefer to walk? You have to feel secure. The system has to be convenient. We have to build in the efficiency. Very important, the comfort, and then the welcome. So I'm going to demonstrate that with a couple of slides. What's missing here?
Sidewalks.
Sidewalks? What else? So let's put in the sidewalks and the crosswalks. Yeah. What else is missing?
Showers.
Well, that's probably
Something
true.
to go to.
Place structures.
There you go. I think the key is until all the land uses celebrate a place, or there's just a little parklet, whatever it is, you need the eyes on that space. And unless our land use, which fortunately is being modernized right now, until it requires buildings to front the street, and watch over the street, and so on, then we truly won't get people using our systems quite the way they should. I'm very proud of this achievement. I got to work on this bridge in Olympia, and this is the before and the after. But look how much more comfortable it is. And the additional reason why you want to walk over this bridge, if nothing else, just to look out at the water, right? You may not even want to go to a new place, but you want to be there. And you're going to meet people there. And likewise, and thanks for setting the stage on this night, the suburban pattern is not just horrible in terms of not producing the highest retail, it just doesn't create a desire to get out of the automobile, and people stay in the automobile. But on the right, with a beautiful buffer of parking and green trees and everything, there's a really high desire to walk in that space. I'm going to go quickly through economics, but I want to add to some of Mike's points. And first of all, point out that anytime you take any trip, doesn't matter what the trip is, society is picking up some of the cost. But turns out that walking, society only has to pick up a penny. Even though you put the buck in for that walking trip. Biking, society only has to pay 8 cents. Transit's pretty good, but society has to pay $1.50 for the dollar you put in. And then, if you drive a car, especially drive alone, society has to pay $9.20 for the dollar that the motorist put into that trip. That's an important factor. Likewise, when we spend money on active transportation infrastructure, we're creating huge numbers of jobs, more than we are with any other mode we build for. And so it's beautiful that when cycling and walking investments return $11.80 for the dollar that the government had to pay, that's a very good return on investment. So I think it's really important to understand that concurrent construction, that is when a road's going to be touched, that's the time to put in the missing sidewalks or the missing bike facilities or whatever. And this figure is real. It only costs $86,000 per mile when it was concurrent construction. And had they waited and built the sidewalks on their own, standalone, that would have been like $304,000. And transportation monies are not easy to come by. Now, to get to the land use side, I love this set of images. Portland, Oregon, from 1980 to 1990, focused on containing their growth to appropriate size and scale. They were able to reduce their property taxes 29%. And the air quality went up, and neighborhood quality went up. But look what happened the same 10 years in Atlanta. They had to increase their property taxes just to pay for the things people want. But their air pollution became worse, and the neighborhood quality plummeted, right? The other thing I'd like to say is if we spend more money on cars, then the money flows elsewhere. And we don't need for the money to flow elsewhere. Now, we're not big enough for this to be the right number for Port Townsend, but if you had 15,000 fewer cars, you're going to keep $127 million in the community. Local businesses, instead of somewhere in Toyota country or wherever, is where the money's going to flow. Now, this one's going to go pretty fast to set the right target speed and build the right street parts. How fast would you say the average driver would go given this?
35, 40.
Yeah, 35 or even 40. And but what if you add this? How about if you add this? How about if you add this? Now, here come the big ones, all right? We've tampered with the speed a bit, but terminate the Vista. And by doing that, the speeds really come down, right? But this is all that the engineers and planners get to do. Now, you set the stage so the developer can come in and make money and build the buildings, right? With this, I can guarantee the speeds will not be above 15, right? So, anyway, same with the school. How fast would most motors go with the streets this way? Yeah, real fast. At a school, in fact. But what if we, again, bring the necessary changes to green the space, to purify the air, to narrow the lanes, and make the other changes to bring the speeds down. So I'm going to quickly go through some of my favorite streets in America. I love this street in Sequim. Notice as you look further out in the photo, both sidewalks are set back, so you have a beautiful separation. Up near, they just didn't have enough right of way, so they had to attach the sidewalk, but the bike lane saves the sidewalk, right? It keeps the motors further away. This one, which I helped build in the Panhandle of Florida, where I'm going to be tomorrow, narrow lanes and curb extensions, what we call inset parking. And beautiful, motors respond, and they only drive about 15. And again, notice the buildings honor the street. They watch over the street. I love medians. When we have space, not all streets have enough space, but I would love to see medians in the lower part of Sims Way. I think we have the space for it. Keep short turning pockets where we need them, but put in medians where we can absolutely green up the area. I love this street. It's a state street in North Carolina. But again, notice the 10-foot lanes. The bike lanes get an extra bonus with a valley gutter. And then they kept the parking down to 6 feet. But it works because, again, of the valley gutter. I love valley gutters. There are some streets that shouldn't have curbing. If we want to send a message that this is not a place for speed, I love curbless streets. And I think we have some opportunities for that in Port Townsend. Now, the big guy, right? About 80% of all fatal crashes occur at intersections. So I am for all about building compact intersections. So when I look at the intersection by Safeway, this is what I have in mind. Maybe a turn lane, but I wouldn't put in the right turn lanes. Anyway, this is what I'm really talking about. And here's where the curb extensions come in. And build wide crosswalks. I think on a principal street, we should never have a crosswalk less than 10 feet wide, right? Preferably even 12 on a street like 20. Then on neighbor streets, and this is really my thought of what any mini circle should be, is green. And to have the right design, also to have the curb extensions, and how all this work. Now, mid-block, beautifully done here. Notice they got the median in, and the curb extensions, and back when this was built, the engineer tells me that all this went in for $20,000. Now, it may not be possible with today's costs, but that's pretty significant, and this is right where the children are trying to get to school, right? One of my favorites, and I take great pride in having been a visionary for this. This is a street in Asheville, and this is the same intersection today. But look what this did, because a roundabout will move up to 50% more traffic. Look further down, you'll see we took 3 lanes out of the big street, right? And so here you see it. We took this wide 5-lane street down to 1 lane in each direction. Now that's why Upper Sims Way works. The roundabouts do the big lift, right? Here again, you see the before and then the after. And so they were able to take out the unnecessary lanes. We can also introduce other ways to fool the driver. Note what they did here. The paved portion in these lanes is only 8 feet. So I think we can get down. But they tricked the motors because the gutter pan is almost 10 feet. So it's actually a 13-foot opening, but only 8 feet is what the motors read. So it helps slow them down and focus on what's important at that intersection. Quickly, I'll go through bike facilities. I think this is clearly a town that's getting many of the facilities right. Again, strong emphasis on separating bicyclists from traffic whenever we can. And in this case, notice we can use color to further narrow the lanes and to make things work. Buffered bike lanes, and again, I think we have some opportunities for buffered bike lanes, certainly. Okay, I've only got 5 minutes, okay. So I'm going to go through the tools for bicycling and then get down to how we should be, oh, I'm sorry. But this is all going to be available to everybody, right, Scott? Where's Scott going?
We'll make it available.
Okay, make it available to everybody so you can go through it at leisure. But anyway, certain streets need to change their speed accordingly, and we're doing that. But I, speaking with Don Ho, who now works for the state, deputy administrator for the DOT, he agrees that we can bring the speeds down on portions of lower Sims that are just too high. You know, there are portions that need to be the speed they're posted, but other areas could come down. Oh, I had that in there a second time. My apologies. Closing out with best practices, again, more tools that we could do. This is a street I worked on in Batesville, Arkansas. At first, when they said the downtown's dead, can you bring back the life? I thought, well, just return it to a 2-way street, right? And then I thought about it. I said, no, we can do better than that. We'll keep it a 1-way because we don't really need the second lane. It's not required. And we'll do a chicane. So more parking, a lot more parking actually. And you see the difference? And so that's a nice tool. I think there are a number of streets that could be turned into a Verna or a shared street. That's an opportunity. And they're beautiful. Here, the speed wouldn't be more than 5 or 10 miles an hour. And so many different ways we can do it. We can do this with certain new neighborhoods that end up being built. And the whole concept of shared street, the one on the right, is Seattle. Again, a gift from former mayors and a great staff there. And or do we have the opportunity to create a street like this one? This is Asheville, and it's called Wall Street. It's one of the very first shared streets. There are times during the day where freight can be delivered, but then other times where it's just fully for the people. And again, we have these opportunities. We can get this lane down to 9 feet. I measured it's actually only 8 feet by backing angle parking. Think about that. And this works beautifully, right? And there are little things we do differently with back and angle parking. There's a little more overhang on the back end of a car. But we accommodate that where we put the street furniture. And my closing. The collaboration, the implementation, that's what today's all about, right? How do we build that common vision, that common set of strategies? We do everything incrementally. We test things out first. And once we've got one great model project, then we're given permission to do more. And so this is just an example where I was able to get this concept across. Look at the difference between something at a high school that just didn't honor anyone or any land use and what the roundabout in this case was able to do. This is incredible. But we need all the people, right? You're like the choir, you all get this. But we need many people who are going to say, why'd you take my right turn lane away? You know, I had to wait an extra 30 seconds, right? Yeah, you did. Thank you. But anyway, if we need a litmus test for what we design, any change we make in the future, any change, we should ask, are we rewarding the short trip and providing for active transportation and people in place? And kind of to put a capstone on the purpose of the concept today, the automobile has been given every method to be intimidating. They really have. And they've been given every incentive to make the trip by car and never walk or bike. That needs to turn around. And with that, we'll close with my great friend, Bill Murray. And truly, this is the crew that's going to do it. And it's going to do it because Port Townsend deserves more love. Let's amp it up and let's make it happen. Thank you, everybody.